Hi everyone, I'm Mike and this is the Sunday Art Show. As you just saw in the reference photo there, I'm going to be doing a sketch and going to try and stay pretty loose and lively with this one of this rather strange looking bird. I think this is some kind of goose. I haven't got round to looking it up, but if anybody watching has been to the grounds of Hever Castle, which was also the inspiration for last week's video, by the way. So Hever Castle is in Kent. It's the former home of Anne Boleyn, ill-fated wife, one of many, to Henry VIII. So I assume this is some kind of goose, but as I say, I haven't looked into it. Anyway, so I've started off, I'm actually using cartridge paper again this week, as opposed to my usual mixed media paper. And I'm coming in with a burnt umber watercolor marker. Now, the thing to be aware of here predominantly is how I'm holding the pen. Notice I'm not holding it in the same way I would as if I was writing my name. It's just a very loose grip. The heel of the pen, or the end of the pen, is in the palm of my hand. And then I've really just got it, clamped with fingertips and thumb tip. So that encourages you to minimize tension in your arm and hand and wrist. And it generally allows for a more free-flowing line. Now, the trade-off here, of course, is can we be accurate and precise and still stay loose? And that's always a little bit of a challenge. But I've switched to an orange marker now, and I'm still keeping that relatively loose handhold on the pen, on the marker pen. Again, this is a watercolor marker. I'm using Winsor Newton watercolor markers, but there are several brands on the market, and of the ones I've tried, they all seem to be pretty much about the same quality, I would say. So what I'm doing here is just going back around my original drawing, adding in a few more details, correcting the lines where need be, trying to be a little bit more precise, but still trying to keep that loose handhold on the pen. And I guess I should state up front that, I'm not going for an ultra realistic depiction here. I'm just having some fun, as I said, doing a loose and lively sketch. And, if it doesn't look exactly like this particular breed of bird, then I'm not too concerned. I just want to create something, that's got a little bit of life to it and an interesting image. So I've added in some tail feathers, I should say, that weren't included in the original burnt umber marks. And you can see I've got the angle of the head a little bit wrong compared to the reference at least, but it's still a reasonably believable pose, I would say. So coming in with a magenta now. So you can see I'm more or less dispensing with the colours in the actual reference and just having fun putting my versions of the colours in. Now notice when I applied those lines around the neck, that little collar of colour, if you like, notice how the lines kind of help create that sense of being a concave surface at that part of the neck. As the neck swells out into the body, the surface is pretty much concave. So using those curved lines really helps with that. Now you notice I just switched back to pen hold, but then I've kind of corrected myself a little bit there and said to myself, okay, well, let's stay loose. Let's stay loose for as long as we can. And I will say, though, that practicing in this way, it's of great benefit, because if you can get into the habit of staying loose, then first of all, you tend to use more of the joints in your body to make marks. So, for example, if you're just clasping the pen lightly, you not only use your fingers, but you'll use your wrist. You've got the full movement there, your elbow, your shoulder. And if you're standing at an easel, you can even start bending your knees and twisting your torso and stuff to create lively marks. Now, the other thing with working loose is it's very quick in general. So the more you practice working loose, the better you'll become, in terms of getting the marks to go where you want without kind of straining or tensing up. So that allows you to get the framework, the big tonal blocks, the big shapes in place nice and quickly. And then you can say to yourself, okay, well, which bit do I want to work up in detail? I mean, this is just a quick drawing. So, it's not I don't have to worry too much. But even if you're doing like a full-on painting, where you're spending hours at a time on the painting, it's still a really good thing to do, I think, is to try and stay as loose as possible. Coming in with a Prussian blue next to put in some of the darker marks in and around the eye. And you can see, you know, I've exaggerated quite a lot, really, this kind of scruffiness of the feathers on the back of the head. And that's definitely a good tip, I think, for drawing or sketching, is to make the image your own. You know, so you probably don't want to stray too far into caricature, but there's no harm in adding a few little extra characterful tufts of feathers and things like that. Now you can see I have gone to, you know, something resembling the type of hold I would use if I was just writing a letter or something like that. But I am, even when I'm in that kind of pen hold, I've switched back now to the previous marker pen hold. But even when I was using the kind of writing mode, I am still being conscious about how tightly I'm holding my pen. And even though my fingers might be curled at times, I'm, you know, being careful not to over tighten. So a good little check to see how much tension you hold in your hands habitually is to just, you know, with no pen or anything, just put your hands out in front of you, palm up. And if you look at your fingers, if your fingers are curled at all, then that's essentially a result of, you know, years and years of hanging on to a habitual tension. Now, you know, you probably think, if you do that yourself, you may well think, well, I don't feel that my hands are tense. And that's quite a normal response, because if you imagine carrying a heavy box or something like that, then obviously you would need to put tension into the muscles in your arms in order to support the weight of that box. That would be a necessity. And now imagine you're carrying that heavy box some distance, and then somebody comes along, and without you seeing, they just put a coin on top of the heavy box. You can't really detect that change in weight, because the tension in your muscles kind of blocks the signals up into your brain in such a way that you can't detect tension that you're hanging on to. So coming back to the actual art now, if you spend a lot of time at a keyboard, or you just work with your hands a lot, or whatever it is you do in life, we can hang on to these patterns of habitual tension quite a lot, and we become so used to them that to us they feel normal. So consequently, it's a good little test, or just observational test, to look at your hands and see how much of a curl they naturally have. And of course, if you straighten your fingers out, initially that will feel wrong, because, you know, that's not our normal. But if you're able to let go of that tension, then eventually the fingers in your hands will straighten out, even when you're just sort of relaxing and not thinking about it. And then when you come back to your art, you're able to hold the pen with a finer touch. You'll be more sensitive to the amount of pressure you're applying on the paper. And there are quite a lot of benefits, basically, in terms of increasing your awareness of how you hold your pen. So it's certainly something that's helped me a lot over the years. And of course, it means you get less tired as well, and all that kind of thing. Anyway, back to this rather strange looking bird that I'm creating here. So I think the actual real animal is quite quirky and unusual looking. I don't think I've ever seen a bird quite like this before. If I have, long forgotten. So bouncing off of that reference, I'm now creating something even stranger, really, with these rather vibrant colours. And you can see I'm enjoying the tuftiness of the back of the neck and the back of the head. I've added even more to that. And just working my way around the head, adding a few more defining lines. And one of the things I was doing a moment ago was just adding a few little squiggly marks here and there. So although I'm painting an animal or a bird which is coated in feathers, or if I was painting a cow coated in hair, or if I was painting somebody's coat which perhaps had a particular textured fabric on it. My general approach is to pick out a few key shapes which mimic the thing that I'm depicting. So I might pick out 3 or 4 feathers, or I might pick out a particular tuft of hair on an animal, or a particular bit of patterning on a coat. But then after that, I kind of have a bit of fun and try and put in a few random marks which I feel capture something of the character. So for example, what I'm doing now, or just did a moment ago, is put in a few shapes which are pretty much feather-like on the back. But when we were up on the head, there aren't really too many of those. There are a few down on the neck, going over that concave magenta section I put in earlier. But there are also just sort of random marks. And it doesn't always work that well, but it can work really well in my opinion, and it just makes for a more interesting image. So I should have said I've been working with a black watercolor marker here for the last couple of minutes. So I tend to avoid black in my paintings, sweeping statement, but I don't mind for my drawings. I think it can add, quite a lot of power to a drawing, just having some strong black marks in there. So here I've reverted to that very loose marker pen hold, just putting in sweeping patches of colour, but again being aware of the curvature of the bird's body. Now this is actually an alcohol grey marker. So one of the great things I love about doing these relatively quick studies is the ability to experiment. And one of the things I love about the alcohol-based markers is that if you run them over a biro line, then it makes the biro ink bleed a little bit, and it creates a beautifully rich line. And I love the way the grey of the marker and the blue of the ballpoint pen line, I love the way they complement each other. So the reason I used the alcohol marker here was I thought, well, I don't think I've ever tried that over the top of watercolor marker. So I thought I'd see what effect it would have. And to be honest, it's nothing particularly spectacular. I don't think I'll be rushing back to combine these two again. It's adding a little bit of a subtle grey, particularly on the head. As you can see, you can back up there now. And you can, as I'm doing right now, add layer upon layer with these alcohol-based markers. So they are fantastic for building up subtly layered or graduated regions of grey or whatever colour you're using, much more so than the watercolour markers are. But in terms of the way it combines with the watercolour, I didn't notice any particular wonderful combination going on. It was just simply putting grey down on top of watercolour marker. Okay, so we're back in with a different brand of watercolor marker now. So these hexagonal ones are, let me just see if I can grab one to remind myself of the make. Here we go. So these are by Spectrum Noir, and it's the Aqua series. And they're essentially the same animal, in my opinion, as the Winsor Newtons, but they do have a hexagonal cross section. So if you prefer to hang on to something a bit more, well, hexagonal, I guess that's the best word for it, in cross section compared to a round marker pen, then worth giving a go. But they're certainly high quality. They're really nice to draw with. And in with a green now. So with the orange, I just put in some big patches of colour. So you can see I'm still staying very, very loose. And for the most part, just kind of blocking in, but blocking in with lines which follow the curvature of the bird's belly or back or flank or whatever it is that I'm working on. A little bit of that same green up around the neck and the head. And then using that over the top of the magenta to give me a nice dark shadow. And then that same marker pen again, just to put in a few squiggles to give the bird a little bit of an environment to live in. So I'm not really worrying about the background at all in the reference photo here, just putting down a little bit of an indication of some raggedy grass. And then coming in with the fine line nib of one of these marker pens, using a grey, and just putting in a much lighter in tone gestural drawing of another bird, just to create a little bit of depth in the picture. Now, having done one of these loose and lively sketches, I think it's quite a healthy thing to kind of self-critique. So the looseness of the background bird, I think that works quite well in terms of creating a sense of distance, you know, within the limits of this fairly simple, quick study I'm doing. The looseness of the back and tail feathers, I think the energy there works quite well, and I think it complements the more controlled area of the head. The belly, however, I'm not so happy with the mark making and the green I chose there. So for now, I'm going to focus in terms of the finished image on just the head area. And this, I feel, has maintained a nice balance between looseness and precision, because if you look, you know, there are quite a few of my initial marks still visible, and it's definitely got a sketchy feel. But I personally feel that adds a bit of personality and movement to the finished drawing. So there we go. There are some of the benefits of staying loose and lively and kind of being aware of how you hold your pen when you draw. Hope you enjoyed this little video. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you next Sunday for the next episode of the Sunday Art Show. Thanks very much for watching.